A legend was born in the quiet country of Lancashire in late 13th century Scotland as a boy came into the world. William Wallace was raised in the midst of the lush hills and grand castles of the area as the son of Malcolm Wallace and Margaret Crawford. He displayed an unyielding determination from a young age, inspired by the tales of valor and fearlessness recounted by the historic Scottish clans. As William Wallace grew older, the oppression of Scotland by the English became severe. The English crown's involvement in the Scottish court began after the passing of King Alexander III of Scotland. He had been a successful ruler who brought a period of peace to Scotland during his reign. He kept a positive relationship with the English, using them as trading partners. Additionally, he signed the Treaty of Perth in 1266, which effectively resolved territorial disputes between Norway and Scotland. The death of Alexander III in 1286 resulted in a succession crisis in Scotland. At the age of 44, he passed away due to a fall from his horse while traveling overnight. The demise of the king had a devastating impact on the subjects, since his sole successor was his granddaughter, famously referred to as Margaret, Maid of Norway. Regrettably, Margaret passed away at the tender age of 7 while on a boat trip en route to Scotland, where she was meant to ascend to the throne. Following the death of Alexander III, Scotland experienced a tumultuous period, with conflicts among various clans and nobles vying for the vacant throne. The Scottish nobles sought King Edward I of England's intervention to prevent a devastating civil war. They hoped that the English monarch would assist in establishing a legitimate heir to the throne. For Edward I, this was the perfect opportunity to deploy English troops into Scotland and initiate a military invasion. Although Wallace came from a wealthy and influential family, he was not blind to the injustices perpetuated by the English invaders. He personally witnessed the suffering of his people. William Wallace's character was shaped by these experiences, and they ignited a strong resistance against the English oppressors. The details of William Wallace's life prior to his rebellion are not well documented. However, some chroniclers from that time have reported that Wallace may have aspired to live a peaceful life, and even married a lovely young woman named Marion Braveheart. In 1297, an English soldier who held the office of Sheriff of Lancashire, where Wallace and his wife lived, brutally murdered his darling. Wallace, consumed by grief and a strong urge for justice, made the decision to take action and fight. He relentlessly pursued his wife's murderer and delivered a fatal blow with a fierce sword strike. After gaining fame for killing the English sheriff, William Wallace rallied the Scottish clansmen by promising them revenge and freedom. With his eloquence and natural leadership skills, he was able to win over the Scottish warriors and unite them towards a common goal: driving out the English invaders. William Wallace led the Scots in numerous battles against King Edward I's troops. Due to being outnumbered, the Scots depended on guerrilla tactics to weaken the enemy forces. They would launch surprise attacks on the English in forests or villages. William Wallace's cause gained new supporters with each victory, resulting in the formation of a well-organized and respectable army that was unprecedented in Scottish history. The Battle of Stirling Bridge, fought on September 11, 1297, is a significant event in Scottish history. Wallace, followed by his faithful friend Andrew Moray, bravely led an army against a larger English force. The latter army, primarily composed of heavy infantry and cavalry, endeavored to cross the narrow bridge over the River Forth to confront the Scots. Wallace and his army chose a defensive strategy by positioning themselves on a nearby hill, which effectively blocked the passage across the bridge. The Scots launched a surprise attack when half of the English army had already crossed the bridge. Descending the hill, they caught the English in an adverse position. The heavy infantry of the English army found themselves trapped on the bridge, which hindered their ability to move effectively. Meanwhile, the Scottish archers and lancers opened attacks from the rear. During the Middle Ages, the English placed great reliance on their heavy cavalry, which was widely regarded as one of the most formidable and effective military units. The Scottish army successfully defended against it by implementing the Schiltron strategy, which involved Scottish rustic pikes. The English army sustained significant losses and ultimately disintegrated. The triumph of the Scots at Stirling Bridge dealt a major blow to the English and bolstered the reputation of William Wallace as the leader of the Scottish resistance. William Wallace and Andrew Moray were appointed as the guardians of Scotland. Their fame quickly spread throughout their land. However, shortly after the victory in 1297, Andrew Moray passed away, leaving Wallace to bask in all the glory of their triumph. Unfortunately, treachery and intrigue had already infiltrated the Scottish ranks, eroding the unity that had been achieved through great effort. In 1298, King Edward I ordered a new invasion against the Scots, which provided the Scottish traders with the opportunity they had been waiting for to act against Wallace. This event ultimately led to the Battle of Falkirk, which had fateful consequences. During the battle, Edward I took personal command of the English army and implemented a meticulously planned strategy to confront the Scots. At the start of the battle, the English archers launched an attack on the Scottish lines, resulting in considerable damage. Subsequently, the English heavy infantry and cavalry proceeded with their advance, while the Scottish infantry tried to maintain a defensive formation. The Scottish troops were hindered by the marshy terrain and heavy rain on that day, which impacted their mobility and effectiveness. Furthermore, the English army employed a combination of cavalry and archery tactics, which proved to be effective in overwhelming the Scottish defenses. Although Wallace and his men made heroic efforts, the Scottish forces were unable to withstand the English attack. They sustained significant losses and ultimately retreated from the battleground. The Scottish cause suffered a major setback with their defeat at the Battle of Falkirk. Despite managing to survive the fighting and escape from the English, William Wallace's military reputation suffered greatly. Following the disaster at Falkirk, Wallace resigned from his position as Guardian of Scotland. He then passed the role to Robert the Bruce, who was well known as the Earl of Carrick. This transition occurred 2 months after the aforementioned event. William Wallace traveled to France to request the assistance of the French king in their shared battle against a mutual adversary. Upon his return to Scotland, Wallace continued his fight against the English, primarily utilizing guerrilla tactics. In 1305, William Wallace was betrayed by a Scottish knight who was actually loyal to King Edward I of England. After being captured by English forces, William Wallace was charged with treason and taken to London to stand trial. Wallace was put through a mock trial in court, where he was not given any opportunity to defend himself or receive mercy. As a result, he was sentenced to death. William Wallace maintained his pride and refused to pledge loyalty to the English king, even when faced with torture and the possibility of execution. On August 23, 1305, he faced death with dignity, fully aware that his sacrifice would serve as an inspiration for generations to come. Despite the fact that William Wallace was executed, his unwavering spirit was not extinguished by his death. His heroic persona has been immortalized in ballads, poems, and legends that have been handed down from one generation to the next.